Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 24th of May, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link today, we have Debi Evans and Ben Rubin. Well, of course, we're going to get started with the election. Hopefully, we won't be talking too much about the election over the next 6 weeks, but we will talk about it a little today. So we put that on screen. Polling stations will be open on the 4th of July. And well, of course, that's Independence Day if you're in the United States. So I thought it was appropriate we should call that Independence Day in the UK, because we would like to see many independent candidates doing very, very well and kicking a bunch of these party political animals out. So what's been going on today? Well, first of all, they are now rushing in the Commons to pass certain types of legislation. So the infected blood compensation legislation they want to get passed. They want to get the post office convictions quashed today. They want the Victims and Prisoners Bill passed if they possibly can. The media bill is going to be heard, but it's unlikely, I suppose, which gets a yellow. And the reds are the no-fault evictions. That's going to be dropped, or it has been dropped, and the cigarette ban seems to have been dropped. But of course, what else has been dropped while they're busy campaigning? Well, any opportunity to read the House of Commons library briefing on what is the proposed World Health Organization Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. That, of course, will all take place while the House of Commons is away shouting at people to vote for them. So nobody gets to read this article within the House of Commons. Perhaps that's not a bad thing. But the rewards have been coming out, because many Tory MPs, of course, are not standing again. They see the writing on the wall and they don't see the point. So they're running for cover at the moment and not standing again. One of those, of course, is Matt Hancock. But he is very proud that he's been given the whip back. So the whip, as a Tory, he's back in the Conservative Party as of yesterday. After 2 decades serving his country, he says, in opposition and in government. And he wishes Rishi and all his colleagues all the best in the campaign to come. But he's proud to leave Parliament as a Conservative MP. I don't know whether these people even recognise the optics of their behaviour sometimes. But anyway, I thought we should take a look at who is going to be the next Prime Minister, because he is probably going to be the next Prime Minister, and that's Keir Starmer. And of course, we all remember a few months ago when he was at Davos being asked whether he would rather be in Parliament or at Davos. And he was very clear that he would prefer to be at Davos because he could get business done at Davos. Now, what kind of business was he talking about? Well, we'll have a look at that in a second. But of course, we can't forget that sitting on his shoulder is the ghost of Jimmy Savile. And Keir Starmer should never be allowed to forget that. So what am I talking about when it comes to why would he prefer to be at Davos? Well, this is the main reason. Of course, Keir Starmer, one of only 2 sitting MPs to have been a member of the Trilateral Commission, and he's still a proud member, he's still proudly mentioned on the Trilateral Commission website. He is no longer a member, allegedly. I'm not certain that if you join an organisation like this, you ever leave, but that's another question. And the other MP that was serving whilst being a member of the Trilateral Commission was former MI6 agent Rory Stewart, otherwise known as Florence of Arabia. So these are the only 2 MPs that have been serving in the Trilateral Commission at the same time as being MPs. Now, of course, we all know that Rory Stewart was the man who went to Bilderberg Group and then refused to explain to his constituent when he was asked whether he was there in a professional as an MP or a personal capacity. And we know that Tobias Ellwood has played this same gag with respect to 77 Brigade. So maybe there's some questions to be asked about Keir Starmer and his activities outside of Parliament, and whether he's really appropriate to be an MP, a Prime Minister, or not. Now, if you want some more background to this, Declassified UK has this article: Keir Starmer joined secretive CIA linked group while serving in Corbyn's shadow cabinet. And I published this in July last year. It gives a lot of background to Starmer's involvement with the Trilateral Commission, and I strongly recommend that everybody reads that, and perhaps would want to distribute that as far and wide as possible. Then we should remember, and Ben, I'm going to ask you about this because during Passover, of course, he was recording a video at the Aleph synagogue. But Ben, this isn't the normal synagogue that he goes to.
No, it's not. Starmer and his family go to the liberal Jewish synagogue in St. John's Wood, which is also the synagogue attended by various members of the Rothschild family.
Right. So what we see here is someone who pretends to be a politician, a career politician, pretends to be wanting to be prime minister, but in fact prefers to be hobnobbing with the people at Davos, with the people in the Trilateral Commission, and with the Rothschilds. So where does that leave us with respect to democracy?
That's a very good question. And, let's not just pick on Keir Starmer. He's clearly got some questions to answer here, but this is just the political class through and through, isn't it?
Well, it is. I'm picking on him because he wants to be the boss. So it's reasonable to pick on him, I think. I mean, you're right. It does go beyond him as well. So what we would say then is, let's not have either of these fools. We certainly don't want Rishi Sunak. We don't want Keir Starmer either. It is going to be Independence Day. So let's create this hashtag of Independence Day and let's make sure that the independents get a fair shout. Now, we've said it before, I'll say it again. In the past, independents haven't had a fair shout. When Brian stood as an independent in the 2010 election, if you remember the story, the BBC arrived at the UK Column office and invited him to give an interview to the BBC. He asked, "How long have I got?" And they said 6 seconds. So that is the type of coverage that independents normally get. It is up to us to give any independents that are standing that we agree with, at least, the opportunity to get a fair hearing. So we'll leave it there. And as I say, hopefully not too much from us on the election over the coming weeks, because it's not really that interesting, I think. But I thought we should at least make some kind of opening comment on it. But Ben, you've got more on Starmer.
Absolutely. And you are absolutely correct, Mike. He is going for the top job, so he does require special scrutiny. And let's let him tell us what his plans for the country are, and in particular, what the most important mission is facing the UK.
The most important mission, bar none, is economic growth. I see you as the engines for change.
Today, we're here to talk about how we as mayors can focus on growth. We're already doing it, the incumbents, growing our economy faster than other places in the country. We know that devolution works.
It's an absolute privilege to be here, part of this group, working with Labour, making the difference. The Labour mayors working with Labour government can give, certainly people in this region, for the first time in a generation, hope that their lives can be better, hope that their families have a better future here, and hope that the places where they live have a better future too.
We need to build from the foundations of create good quality local jobs that really matter to people, to get control of our public transport and to train the childcare workers so that people can overcome those barriers to getting into work.
The engine room of national renewal is around this table. Our task is to rebuild our economy from the ground up, and that can only be done with leaders like you.
That was delightful.
Wasn't it just? Yes, the engine room of national growth. They're going to rebuild the economic system from the ground up. There's nothing more hilarious than politicians talking about economic growth. Not a single one of the people in that film have created a single viable job in their entire careers, and they're not going to at any point in the future. I can promise you that. But they've been engaging in the economic discussion, and this week, a bunch of those people, that was the Metro mayors and Keir Starmer, a bunch of the Metro mayors have descended on Leeds for this event, which is UK REIF, the Real Estate Investment and Infrastructure Forum. And they are helping to build back better. Actually, still says that on their LinkedIn page, right? And build back better is obviously the World Economic Forum mantra that I thought most people had abandoned around 2022 because we worked out what it meant, but they're still at it up in Leeds. It's a big exhibition and a public-private marketplace, ultimately, for new technologies in energy and infrastructure. bunch of the mayors were there, so you can see here, these are a few of the people that were in that video. Steve Rotherham from Liverpool, Tracy Brabin, the mayor of West Yorkshire, up front there, taking a selfie, doing the major work of current 21st century politician, taking pictures for social media. You've also got Oliver Coppard from South Yorkshire, Richard Parker, the new mayor of the West Midlands, and Angela Rayner there, Shadow Secretary for Levelling Up at the back. Andy Burnham was also floating around, mayor of Greater Manchester, and Rory Stewart, who Mike has already talked about. He was there too, and I actually don't think that he's ever been to the north of England before. This is the kind of gentleman that gets a bit of vertigo if he goes north of the Watford Gap. So anyway, he made a special effort to get there. And as I said, this is a public-private marketplace, right? So this is about introducing investors and developers to mayors who are ultimately going to be funding this new energy system, this new economic system that we're going to build from the ground up, right? And as we've spoken about a lot, and we'll continue to speak about, this kind of public-private marketplace is fascist. This is a fascist system, and it's predicated really on the wholesale demolition of existing cities, especially existing industrial capacity, which is ultimately where economic growth comes from, right? So you've got these people talking about growth. They want to use taxes to fund growth. That doesn't make any sense. And in the process of doing what we're planning to do, we're going to destroy the actual source of growth. Try and make sense of that. You can't. It's completely contradictory. And so this is about construction, but it's also very much about transportation. So actually, you would have seen that video with Starmer in at the start was held in a bus station. So this is about the transportation systems, public transport, driving towards zero carbon technologies, smart grids, ultimately 15-minute cities, the whole shebang as put forward by the World Economic Forum. And it is being fully backed by the cabinet, or the shadow cabinet, certainly, as they still are at this moment in time. So this is Angela Rayner, the shadow secretary for Levelling Up, basically standing there and giving the full formal front bench stamp of approval to proceedings. This is what we're going to do. This is where growth is going to come from. Regional mayors borrowing money from private investors to purchase services from private sector companies in a fascist marketplace, which will leave our cities looking like this, right? So this is the Reef site up in Leeds. This is the Creative Quarter, right? This doesn't look like a northern city. That is not actually what Leeds is like, right? It's just some little bubble that they've created with these identikit buildings. You could be anywhere in Europe. You could be anywhere in the world, really. Like, there's absolutely no flavour, no local personality to this. And all of it, particularly the electric stuff, the net zero stuff, is built on really, really dodgy technology, right? So we know that it's predicated on the use of slave labour. This is a cobalt mine in the Congo. There are over 40,000 child slaves working in appalling conditions to mine the raw materials for this smart grid that we're being told that we need to move over to. And actually, this is a big geopolitical issue, because just this last week, there was an attempted coup in the Congo, right? So this was actually entertainingly perpetrated, or they attempted to carry out a coup. One of the people involved was this fella, Benjamin Rubin. No relation, but I thought that was quite funny to see my own name pop up, slightly different spelling. And a lot of this is being coordinated by, or it certainly has been suggested it's being coordinated by this fella, Dan Gertler, who is an Israeli billionaire who runs many of these mines, alongside a lot of Chinese mining companies as well. Yeah, so Labour economic policy, the engine of growth, this big transition that they're saying that they're going to invest in, is predicated on the use of slave labour, and ultimately it's just another form of Western imperialism. Right? That's what's being offered here. And how they're going to get us to go along to it and pay for it? Well, let's have a little look at what's been going on in Hackney.
In London, it's an urban setting, it's overpopulated, so the impact of heat is much bigger.
2022, the 40-degree heat wave across London, that was putting a huge amount of pressure and resources on an already stretched NHS.
The most vulnerable people are the ones who work outside. Homeless people, single parents who have less means, people who are elderly.
I found it very, very uncomfortable. I nearly passed out a couple of times.
When the weather is too hot,
I'm short of breath. So you can imagine how it affects people who are older than me.
So the question is, how can we work together to minimise that harm, to help our population stay fit and healthy, to cope with that heat?
The council, they have a lot of part to play, and we, the community, have a lot to play as well. People should be educated. Tell people what to do in case of this emergency.
How prepared we are in London is a big question mark. So it's a great avenue to start this conversation and start acting on it.
Democratic innovation, sortition, basically railroading the public into agreeing to signing up to these new technologies, all handed down from the Economic Forum and the UN, a wholesale transition of our society, a new energy system, untested technologies, destruction of existing cities and industrial capacity, using experimental technologies paid for with taxpayer money in a deeply compromised public-private marketplace, all predicated on the use of slave labour in Africa, to ultimately benefit the Chinese mining companies and an Israeli billionaire who may have just tried to carry out a military coup, all with the blessing of Labour leadership. You really couldn't make this stuff up.
Yeah, a little later in the programme, we'll be talking about the national grid. And so we'll have more to say on that in a second, more public-private partnerships on the way. But Debi, they're rushing through the legislation to give compensation to people affected by the infected blood scandal. Tell us more about blood.
Yes, well, good afternoon, everyone. And, you know, blood is essential to life. Fact. And in light of the infected blood scandal, which has taken 40 years to get to this point, I might add, let's look at blood, because is history repeating itself again? Because I have a feeling it might be. So just before I start off, I just want people to know that the average adult will carry just over a gallon of blood, okay? And you have to be 17 to 65 years old to give blood. So are you able to give blood in the UK? Well, actually, when it comes to the COVID injection, you might want to take note, because according to the NHS Blood and Transplant Service, if you have had a coronavirus vaccine, please wait. Now, please remember this, everybody, 48 hours after having the vaccine before giving blood. So just note that, 48 hours. Now, I found an article in the Eye which says that the NHS Blood Service is amongst the world's safest, but of course, infection risk will never be zero. Now, this was an article written by Paul Gallagher. Now, I wonder where he got that from. Well, as you saw on Wednesday, Mike showed Dame June Rain ensuring the public that the blood is safe in the UK. Maybe carries a little risk, but it's safe. So let's go and have a look at some proof, shall we, Dame June Rain? Because at the MHRA board meeting, of which, can I just say to everybody listening, please join us for extra, because I have so much more to say about the MHRA board meeting. But clearly, during the MHRA board meeting, blood was declared to be safe. So let's go and have a look at AHA journals, circulation, which actually says here that circulating spike protein detected in post-COVID-19 mRNA vaccine myocarditis, free spike antigen was found in the blood of adolescents and young adults who developed post-mRNA vaccine myocarditis. So we know that free spike antigen is in the blood. So if we go further and look at the British Journal of Haematology, there's a paper, very interesting paper actually, called Refusing Blood Transfusions from COVID-19 Vaccinated Donors. Are we repeating history? So when I looked further on in the paper, and this is where it gets very interesting, because it talks about deferral times. That's how long it should be after you've had an injection to how long you should give blood. Now, according to the National Library of Medicine, there is no standard deferral time. However, if you just go back to that slide very quickly, you'll see that the WHO actually are recommending 28 days after having COVID vaccination, because the mRNA and the adenovirus, AstraZeneca, would all be classified as indeterminate. So that's 28 days. There is no evidence, I have to say. That's what the blood service have to say. However, if we go to the next paper, we can see that vaccine mRNA can be detected in blood at 15 days post-vaccination. It says the biodistribution and pharmacokinetics of the mRNA containing lipid nanoparticles in these vaccines are unknown in humans. And we know that they are in the blood 15 days post-vaccination. So I rest my case. Currently, blood is not being screened for mRNA and spike protein. No one knows the effects at all. Do you trust the blood that you or your family may be receiving? Now, while we're on to the MHRA, very, very quickly, they announced at the board meeting a consultation on improved safety for high-risk in vitro diagnostic devices. These are devices that can examine samples taken from the human body to diagnose and monitor health conditions. And you might see in red there, I've written to identify blood type before transfusions or tests which identify life-threatening diseases. And the next slide is just the consultation. Please go and look at it because the consultation has now officially opened, but there's much more to say and a lot more expose to do of the MHRA board meeting coming up in Extra.
Yes, okay. So basically we've got a situation where the MHRA is suggesting 48 hours and all the advice from the other official bodies, never mind what we might think, the other official bodies saying actually the timescale needs to be much longer than that.
Yeah, and I can also say there, Mike, too, that nobody is asked at the point of transfusion. And Cheryl Granger wanted me to make this point in particular. This is lipid nanoparticles as well as mRNA. And this gets distributed via the blood to all of your organs, testes, reproductive organs. And nobody is asked at the time of donation, have they received the COVID vaccine or not? How many they've received, boosters. No one's asked anything. So there are no guarantees.
Okay, Debbie, thank you very much. Okay, let's move on. If you like what the UK column does and you'd like to support us, then please go to support.ukcolumn.org. The ways that you can help us out are there, and your help is very much needed. This is only you that keeps us going. And we, again, have to say thank you to everybody that is helping financially, because we can't do this without your help. Share anything you find on the various platforms, especially over the next few weeks, because we, as I say, we want to support independence where we possibly can and get these stupid parties out of politics in this country. But nonetheless, there'll be a lot of other stuff to share on the various platforms. Again, a quick reminder, apparently we have no longer access to Facebook because we're locked out, as are others that we know of, including Vanessa Beeley. If you'd like to pick something up at the UK Column shop, there's plenty there, please do. I just want to mention as well, of course, quite a number of UK Column people up at the Stand in the Light festival in Cumbria. So here is UK Column Villas, which got built yesterday afternoon. And I think they're having a slightly wet day there today, but hopefully the weather will improve over the next day or two. Debbie, your latest blog is up.
It is indeed. And can I just say, what is wellness? And you're going to be hearing a lot more about wellness from Professor Diane Rasmussen McCady. It's going to be mind-blowing, so keep an eye out for that. MHRA, of course, UK Royal Family, where are they? And what is Wegovy being used for?
Yes, okay, thanks, Debbie. And Debbie, you are about to release an interview about something called the Control Group.
Oh, yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have spoken to this amazing organisation. Now, guys, if you want a parallel system, this is the parallel system for you. I'm going to tell you about the Control Group. So basically, it's an independent observational health outcome study working outside of corporate medical establishment. I had the privilege of interviewing Dinny Van Cleef about this. She's a mum. She set this up from scratch. It is absolutely mind-blowing. And I can't tell you enough that they issue you with a card. There's the interviews coming out on Tuesday. We're going to show you a preview. But they issue you a card if you join up. We need 1 million people, everyone. And if you join up, you're technically participating in a worldwide study, and therefore you can't be included on any other experimental studies, if you get my meaning. Let's have a quick sneak preview of Tuesday's interview.
When we first started the control group, the idea was that we needed to stand up and be proud of our status, and not people who hadn't taken the vaccine were terrified of talking up and speaking up and making themselves known in the crowd. And we said the best way to fight back about this is to come together and be visible. So we created a card. Let's get it on screen there. I don't know if you can see it. It was our membership card. And we sent these out around the world. And the idea was that when people ask you to show your vaccine pass, we say, actually, I'm in the control group. I don't have one. The great thing was people were letting people in. So people would use these to get into work. They'd use them to get into restaurants. We've even had people use them to get into other countries. Even what some of our own members of staff have used these when you weren't allowed to travel if you're unvaccinated. This has worked. And it's not a fake pass. It is what it is. It's a membership card, but it's helped people. People have told us that they felt protected by it. They felt that actually just having it on them, even if they didn't need to use it, made them feel that they weren't alone.
That is not going to be an interview anybody wants to miss. It's absolutely brilliant. Don't let the title put you off. Please watch.
All right, so that'll be Tuesday at 1 p.m.
It is indeed. It is indeed. And also, I would really like to give a big shout out to John Watt, Scottish vaccine injured. Now, you probably all remember John Watt. We've had him on the column before, and he was one of the co-founders of the Scottish Vaccine Injury Group. And he is not resting on his laurels. He's fed up with the government doing nothing. So he's organised an amazing event with some great speakers. It's coming up very soon. And I got the good fortune to catch up with him earlier. So have a listen to what John Watt says about the event that he's putting on to raise money for the vaccine injured.
So obviously there's an event on the 2nd of June in Glasgow. It's called the Bring the Noise Live podcast. It's to try and raise money for the vaccine injured. Unfortunately, Debi, the vaccine injured have kind of been left by the government and the NHS, unfortunately. And basically I'm trying to do what the government should be doing. After me confronting Rishi Sunak, I still haven't heard anything from that man. So you would think that this is the kind of lengths that we need to go to try and help these people. So this event on the 2nd of June is very, very important. It's a topic that must not go away. I don't think we should ever forget this. They talk about the blood scandal, the post office scandal, all these scandals. Well, this is the biggest scandal in history around the world. So this event, 2nd of June, Classic Grand in Glasgow. We've got fantastic speakers such as Dr. Asim Malhotra, as we all know, has been doing fantastic work going around the world. He was in Helsinki speaking to governments over there. We've got Dr. John Campbell, as we all know. I feel Dr. John Campbell's done a fantastic job on YouTube, getting the word out there, telling as many people as possible, as he was a man that took this and has now done a full U-turn on it and now reading out the data. Neil Handley MP, again, another man who took this thing, done a full U-turn, and he's now speaking on excess deaths alongside Andrew Bridgen, and Neil's a fantastic man. And then we've got Dr. Tina Pearce, who's a fantastic woman. Her and her team are one of the best doctors in the country. Her and her team and the protocols they put in place was one of the reasons how I managed to get out of my bed and how I managed to get out of the wheelchair, Debi. So I still struggle myself, but I'm still here to raise as much awareness on this important topic. This is our kind of way to give back to the people, because I know in the past people have donated to the vaccine injured. So I'm putting on an event which I'm hoping will be a show as well, very powerful, so they can walk out of there saying, yes, this subject can't go away. This is a very important topic and we must never give up. And I like to say, bring the noise, Debi, because we've got to keep going, every single one of us. And if anyone questions this thing, I ask doctors to come along, MPs, anyone from the real mainstream media should be coming along to this event because it needs to be heard. You can get tickets at Tickets Scotland. So if you type in Ticket Scotland and then type in Bring the Noise. The VIP tickets have sold out, Debbie. There's only a handful of seated tickets left, and we've still got standing tickets available. So we are 1 week away, the 2nd of June, Classic Grand in Glasgow. Get your tickets at Ticket Scotland.
So if you can, please join them all on the 2nd of June.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Debbie. Now, staying with you then, in Plymouth, I don't know whether you're about to mention this, but in Plymouth, they've just announced a new community health centre kind of place being built at a huge expense right in the centre of the city. This isn't just happening here, though.
No, and thank you very much indeed for sending me that article. And if you're in Plymouth, you're going to get road closures for a long time coming. So after you sent me that, Mike, I did a bit of research, and I'm so sorry to go back to my own research. So on UK Column, I published this NHS long-term plan, mental health implementation plan, Phoenix or Dinosaur. What we're going to be looking at here is a complete different change in health. We're looking at diagnostics, but we'll come on to that in a minute. So where did this all start? Well, the Blair overhaul, that wasn't very surprising, was it? Where he said 500 one-stop shops where members of the public would be able to see dentists, social care professionals and GPs under one roof. So we've been calling them one-stop shops. So what happened in the May-Johnson era? Well, in the May-Johnson era, we went into prevention and early diagnosis. Remember that word, diagnostics, and there you have genetics, monitoring, surveillance, basically. So I went to The Guardian, and it doesn't take long. I mean, there's so many articles, quite frankly, to talk about the crumbling hospitals, sewage that's flooding, walls that are crumbling, hospitals that are literally falling apart. But of course, don't forget the Department of Health and Social Care. They announced building 5 more major hospital plans. Doesn't that sound great? £20 billion investment. So if we go to look at the DHSC fact sheet, we can see that indeed they're planning on building 5 major hospitals. There was 40 hospitals in total, but 5 major hospitals. But of course, we've got reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, which has damaged many of them, which is why we're looking to rebuild the hospitals. But in May 2024, it looks as though all of that is on hold. What a surprise. So the government programme, this is an article from The Independent, a government programme to build 40 new hospitals has been beset by delay and indecision. Well, that's a surprise, isn't it? But let's go and see what they're going to be replacing them with, because these are these community diagnostic centres, aka one-stop shops. So this was published in 2021. So we're looking at millions of patients will benefit from earlier diagnostic tests thanks to 40 community diagnostic centres set to open across England. So what are these one-stop shops then? What are they going to be doing? Well, they're going to be doing scans, tests, £350 million investment, early diagnosis, folks. There's that word again, which early diagnosis means early pharmaceuticals. Let's not forget that. Pharmaceuticals before you actually need them, testing healthy people before they're even sick, seeing you before you need to be seen. And they're looking at cancer, ophthalmology. They're looking at pretty much doing every single test under the sun in order to keep you out of the hospitals, because hospitals, of course, are overwhelmed as well as falling down around our ears. So let's jump forward to 2023 when gov.uk then announced that 40 turns into 160. So we've now got 160 community hubs, all to be open by March 2024. So I've got a very, very short video now just to show you what is actually a community diagnostic centre. Have a look at this.
This is an exciting moment in the development of the Community Diagnostic Centre here at Newmarket Community Hospital. This will mean that for the local population, they'll be able to get CT scans, MRI scans, ultrasound scans, lung function tests and heart scans much more quickly and locally.
The Community Diagnostic Centre will make a difference to the local community, giving patients better access to high quality diagnostic imaging on their doorstep.
I have to travel to Hinchingbrook for my assessments. I'm fortunate I have a vehicle, I appreciate other people are not as fortunate. This can only be a good thing.
Plan is to have the CDC completed for November 2024, see patients before Christmas. It's a £15 million expenditure, so it's quite a significant investment in the site. And the team are really excited to deliver this project on behalf of the organisation.
So there you have it. And now I'm going to show you 4 very quick slides, which you're going to want to screenshot probably, because I'm going to show you where these hubs are. Is one in your area? So the NHS are delivering record number of tests and checks. Now, the next 3 slides are going to be where they are. So freeze the screen and just see if one of these slides has got your area on it. And after you've frozen the screen and looked at whether you've got one down the road, I want you to find out really, or to hear from me, how people are recruited. And there was a nice little video. I've got a little screenshot of the video. I watched it, so you don't have to. It's called NHS England Community Diagnostics Centre International Recruitment webinar. Note the word international. So let's have a little bit about what they were talking about. I've taken a couple of screenshots. They're talking about international safe recruitment. We're talking about everybody from radiographers, scientists, dermatologists, you name it, pretty much everyone. So when we start to look at the recruitment model, we can see that these people are being brought in very, very quickly. 4 to 8 weeks selection process, in-country training, assessment, competence, supervision, follow the Lego block of training, and boom, there you go. You have a lot of international staff working at these centres who will be doing your tests, who will be looking after you. But if you do want one nice new major, brand new spanking hospital, when you've been to the community diagnostic centres and you've got your diagnosis of cancer or whatever, there is going to be a beautiful new Cambridge Cancer Research Hospital. It's already being built. So that's what there is to look forward to.
Brilliant. Thank you, Debbie. Now, let's come back onto public-private partnerships. This was actually in a number of places in mainstream media over the last couple of days. National Grid to double investment in UK network to £30 billion over the next 5 years. Now, of course, electric cars, all the new infrastructure we need, because everybody's going to replace gas central heating with electric central heating, means that we've got to generate much more electricity. We don't have any power stations to do that. So we're building more windmills, and we're going to build more storage facilities, which may or may not go on fire at some point. But anyway, the headline, £30 billion. But when I went to have a look at the National Grid press release, they're talking about £60 billion investment plan, building now at pace for the future, they said. So it turns out that they produced a nice infographic to tell us all about it here. So National Grid is investing around £60 billion across our businesses in the next 5 years, nearly double the investment of the last 5 years. So that's £30 billion in the UK, more than doubling of our investment in the last 5 years. They want to make sure we know that bit. And around £28 billion in the United States. So they have a presence over there as well. And so they have raised £7 billion, or they're in the process of raising £7 billion to get this thing started, because this is a public-private partnership, as we'll see in a second, through a rights issue. And so to do that, they are issuing, they say, 1,085 million new shares. So I wonder what that did to the share price. Well, there you go. It tanked yesterday when this news came out and the day before. So the market's not so impressed with this new share issue. But I was talking about a public-private partnership there. Well, here's a little bit of the detail of it, or a hint at it anyway. This is another National Grid press release or article. Huge boost to UK supply chain as National Grid launches the Great Grid Partnership with 7 new industry partners, all united in the drive to deliver the Great Grid upgrade. So you can't go wrong with the Great Grid, because that's what we're going to have in this country, a great grid. I'm sure there's no cynicism amongst any of our viewers to that. But there we go. £30 billion being spent in the UK. Lots of people on social media saying that this will be taxpayer money. Yes, ultimately, of course, it will be, because these are public-private partnerships they're setting up here, and they're wanting to bring in all this private capital from the so-called industry. And as we've seen through the water infrastructure situation, we all know the direction of travel once these types of public-private partnerships are put in place. But don't worry, it gets better, because the City of London isn't going to be left out of this. They have just held a panel discussion all about securing a nature-positive future, because, of course, this is all about net zero. So this is finance enabling innovation. Now, the financial side hasn't been so impressed with the National Grid's plans, but they have their own plans because this is all being run through Terra Carta and Sustainable Markets Initiative, who are the strategic partner of the City of London in this particular project. And as for the question of whether we need all this extra power generation capability or not, electric cars, of course, a major driver, but GB News here reporting that another car manufacturer has decided to duck out of electric cars, or at least they're massively reducing their production of electric cars because there is no market for them. Everybody has realized that they're rubbish and nobody's buying them. So this is a headline here: major car brand pauses development. This is Nissan in this case, amid a slump in demand for drivers. There's been a slump in demand for electric cars for quite a long time now. This is why the second-hand car market is so flat at the moment, because nobody's buying new cars. And it's really the electric cars being sold to the corporate fleets. Nobody in the private market's really buying them at this stage. But the other point to make here, building back better, leveling up, what does that actually mean? If we have a look at global carbon emissions here, we've got a bit of a graph here to show who's emitting the most. We can see that really the sort of leveling up agenda, the Build Back Better agenda, really only applies to the West. If we take China, Russia, and the rest of the world, the so-called Global South, into account, that is absolutely the vast majority of so-called carbon emissions. But of course, leveling up isn't about increasing anything with respect to the first world. It's about bringing our carbon emissions down to a level that's acceptable. But other countries perhaps ignoring that particular agenda quite wisely. But it gets better because the World Bank held a live stream a couple of days ago on the issue of net zero and so on. They, of course, in this case, we're talking about food production. They produced a nice report on it. The report is called Recipe for a Livable Planet. Now, can we imagine what the suggestions are in this? I'm sure we can. I'm sure we know what they are, but let's just have a look. First of all, we've got to protect and restore nature by not doing any farming anymore. So we shouldn't do farming. We should make sure we turn all that back into wildflower meadows and so on. We need to start eating insects, plant-based meat, plant-based dairy, edible insect protein. And we need to make sure that we are funding much more research and development in these areas. And of course, we've got to promote healthy diets through what they're describing as product reformulation. They also want to bring in global nutrition targets. And again, this is all about leveling up. So global nutrition targets doesn't mean bringing nutritional targets in for people that are starving. It's about bringing people that are perhaps a bit wealthier in the world down to a certain acceptable level. And if we put that back on screen a second, the third item on that list, targeted school feeding programs. It makes children sound like cattle. Targeted school feeding programs. It's quite incredible, the language. But just to finish off, if you remember last year, King Charles went off to France, to Versailles. And I just wanted to remind everybody how the other side will live while we're all eating our insects and so on. So this has been doing the rounds of social media. I think I saw this on Jackie Devoy's Twitter feed this morning. So thanks, Jackie, for this. But just to remind ourselves, these are the people that are pushing the net zero agenda the hardest. And this is how they want to live. And we should never forget that when we're talking about net zero and leveling up. Okay, that's enough of that. Now, Ben, this brings us on to another person, Sasha Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a story that caught my eye earlier this week that ties together Labour Party figures, the UK music industry, central government funds relating to COVID, and also the money behind the emerging independent media scene in the UK. It starts with this story, which, and the question is, did Sasha Lord cheat his way to £400,000 worth of public money during the pandemic? And the first question that you're going to ask after that is, who is Sasha Lord? Well, this is Sasha Lord. He's got his shiny website here with his name in big letters, and he is a big-time event promoter, amongst other things. He runs Parklife Festival in Manchester, which is a huge annual gathering coming up again in June. Lots of big-name stars from the major labels and elsewhere. He also runs the Warehouse Project, which basically makes him the biggest nightclub promoter in the UK. They take over huge former industrial units across Manchester every year and do seasons of shows towards the end of the year. He's also the chairman of the NTIA, the Night Times Industry Association, which represents the interests of clubland venues, restaurants, which interestingly was founded by Norris Windross, and then it was run by Alan Miller from the Together Declaration up until Alan resigned a couple of years ago to run Together. That's an aside. Back to Sasha Lord. He's a very busy man, right? Very busy and prominent man, particularly around Manchester. He's also the nighttime economy advisor to Andy Burnham. Right, so he's tapped right into the top levels of the Labour Party, and in fact has himself been tipped as a potential mayor at some point in the future. And he's certainly doing a lot of the things that you'd expect someone with political ambitions to be doing. So he's a very, very prominent businessman, and I'm sure he'd probably say a philanthropist who's been accused of fraudulently obtaining public funds, right? So it's quite a serious accusation here. Let's go back to the article, and we can see that the Mill, it says, has obtained evidence that a security company controlled by Lord repeatedly lied in an application for COVID-19 support. And as a result of this misleading application, the company received over £400,000 of taxpayers' money at the height of the pandemic. And we've seen a copy of the funding application in which Lord's business partner makes a series of false claims about what it does, calling itself the backbone of the national creative events sector. Mark Turnbull, who's a former director of the company, has told us, the Mill, that he believes Lord's company is guilty of fraud and should be investigated by the police. So this clearly seems like it's got legs. Lord vehemently denied the claim earlier in the week. He threatened to sue the Mill for defamation. So my learned friends placed a little statement in the Times of London saying that we vehemently disagree with the article and strongly dispute the accuracy, reliability and transparency of its sources. The Mill, to their credit, stood their ground. They've been making hay out of this all week. They put out the request for further information and evidence from their community and got a lot of information back. And actually, it turns out just this morning that Lord has withdrawn his threat to sue the Mill. He said, I've decided not to pursue legal action for the time being, but he continues to reject their allegations in the strongest terms. So there's something going on here, and we'll see how it develops over the coming weeks and months, right? So this is quite dodgy, potentially fraudulent behaviour circulating around the top levels of the Labour Party, right? You know, coming up to the general election, I think it's important to look at this. But actually, I think it's useful to take this as an opportune moment to look more broadly at Lord's role in COVID, but also the way that the cultural sector, the events industry was roped into helping coerce people to complying with COVID restrictions, right? So Lord himself was hypercritical of people breaking the lockdown restrictions. He says here in this tweet that from June 2020, that if you are one of the morons who attended one of the illegal raves last night, you're a disgrace. You aren't clubbers. You're just selfish idiots. Right? This is a man with really significant influence in the music industry, particularly as it relates to younger clubbers. Right? This is really important. This is about the youth in particular. Right? And the event industry was used to coerce the population into accepting unprecedented lockdowns, mass vaccinations, and most importantly, I think, digital identity systems and the normalization of having to share private health status and data in order to engage in the basic functions of society, right? So this is from the Warehouse Project website. This is their COVID policy. They ask all ticket holders to demonstrate their COVID-19 status via the COVID pass, the NHS COVID pass upon arrival. You have to have proof of a negative lateral flow test. You remember all this rubbish we had to do? or you have to prove that you've been vaccinated with both doses, with the second dose being received at least 14 days before the date of the event. Right? So this was the Warehouse Project. This is Sasha Lord's business pushing government policy, insisting that people coming to these events comply with things that should not be complied with. We should never have been asked to comply with them, right? And it's not just the Warehouse Project, it's the entire events industry. We saw this happening all over the place. And I think that the Arts Council sits right at the centre of this, right? So we talked about this £400,000, but where did it come from? It came from the Arts Council. Right, and what is the Arts Council? It's an arm's length body linked directly to DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. The Arts Council itself was set up in 1946 and it was initiated by John Maynard Keynes, the economist, the socialist economist. It's currently chaired by Nicholas Sirota, who was the former director of the Tate, and he is also a companion of honour to the King. Yeah, one of only 66 people who hold that position. Yeah, and Oliver Dowden, who's currently the Deputy Prime Minister, telling everyone that we've got to prep and get ourselves ready for some unspecified catastrophe that's going to come up in the next few months. He was the running DCMS at the time, right? So this is central government money, taxpayer money, controlled by central government. It's probably a more accurate way of describing it, of a fund of £1.57 billion, about 900 million of which was distributed to organisations like the Warehouse Project, this fake security company that Sasha Lord is, or actually it was a real security company. They presented it as something other than a security company in order to get the money. Sadler's Wells, the Roundhouse in Camden, Fabric Nightclub, a bunch of the kind of digital ticketing platforms like Resident Advisor and Boiler Room. Like all of these people were getting money from the government, ostensibly to see them through the pandemic, but with strings attached, and as a way of using these organisations to comply with and disseminate public policy in response to what we now know in hindsight was a fake pandemic, right? And none of these measures should have been put in place, and they certainly shouldn't have been paid for by on the public purse, and they shouldn't have been promoted by these organisations who have been in receipt of these funds. I think it's an absolute scandal, and we can't let this just disappear down the memory hole, as I think that a lot of people would like us to do. So we'll talk about this more in the future, and I'm particularly interested in seeing how Mr. Lord's case develops. Just as a final point in this, I want to just focus in on the mill, actually. So we talked about the case and this story. Well, where was the story found? So it was on this news website. So this is a bit of information that the mill have shared about their own performance and the scale of their operations. So it's an online thing. It runs on the Substack platform. It launched in June 2020. They then launched in October of that year another title called The Post, focused on Liverpool. Then in March 21, The Tribune, focused on Sheffield. So these are very locally focused news operations, essentially there to replace the local newspapers. They've massively grown their audience. So they're up to about 100,000 people now, with about 5,000 to 10,000 of paid subscribers. They're quite vocal. They're very open about this stuff. They talk about it a lot on their social media. And they've also just launched another title called The Dispatch in Birmingham in June last year. So they're making a big play to become a new national news network. But the question is, who's backing this? Yeah, because they talk about themselves as being independent, but they aren't really independent. They've got a lot of funding that's coming from pretty top-level people in the traditional media. I actually mentioned this back in October and November. Mark Thompson, who is the current CEO of CNN and was formerly the Director General at the BBC during the Jimmy Savile cover-up, right? And then he basically skipped the country, went to the New York Times. He's now at CNN. He's put a load of money into the mill. That's quite interesting. They've also been getting some very high-profile recognition. Joshi Herman, the founder of the mill, was at the Truth Tellers event last week alongside Jeff Zucker, amongst other people, who was the former chief executive of CNN. He was also at the Lords recently, giving some testimony to the Lords on the media in the UK. He's been getting bigged up by William Hague in the Times, as well as Alan Russ Bridger, the former Guardian editor. So the mill has got some big backers, and I just wonder whether Joshi Herman and the team there really know what they're getting themselves into. So watch this space.
Yes, indeed. Well, sticking with the media then, let's come to Ofcom. Well, we've been talking about the issue of regulators wanting to become global regulators, and Ofcom leading the way with online safety and censorship on the internet. So they have just published this. Global online safety regulators map out vision to improve international coordination. Now, we've talked about the fact that the global online safety regulators exist, and we'll remind you who's involved with it in a minute. But they've decided that they want to map out the plans for this. So let's just have a look and see what they're saying. Though each of us has our own domestic regulatory framework, we understand that neither the risks people face online nor the online services they use are confined to national or continental borders. Accordingly, it is important that our regulatory approaches acknowledge this. With global service providers now being required to comply with online safety legislation in multiple jurisdictions, the possibility of cross-border regulatory fragmentation is heightened, potentially creating compliance challenges and costs for companies. That's a real shame for the likes of Google and organizations with, multiple sets of 3 zeros at the end of their annual income. By pursuing regulatory coherence, we can ensure that the online safety of internet users in our respective countries does not stop at the border, and that companies can benefit from compliance economies of scale and legal certainty. So what we're seeing here is that beginning in the UK, we began this narrative that we needed to regulate the internet, that we needed online safety, online harms, protections. That was fed into various other countries, the EU, the United States less so, but certainly the EU and other jurisdictions around the world who joined on the gravy train and managed to get their legislation in first. But nonetheless, the Online Safety Act, as you all know, was eventually passed. But Ofcom, who is the regulator for the internet in the UK now, always had its eyes set on becoming the chair or the global lead on this. So this is the Global Online Safety Regulators Network. These are the current members from Australia, Fiji, France, Ireland, Republic of Korea, Slovakia, South Africa, and the current chair, United Kingdom. And then they have a bunch of organizations that consider themselves observers. So a number of global observers there, some from Canada, some from the EU, Germany, New Zealand, and so on. So this is a growing network of online safety regulators and others related to the regulatory space who all want to form a network to try to produce some cohesive ideas of how online regulation should work so that the poor old multi-billion pound companies like YouTube and Google and whatnot don't have to work too hard to maintain the regulatory standard, which will effectively mean censorship and a sort of level playing field for censorship around the world. We'll watch this space and we'll continue to report on it. So that more or less brings us to the end, Debbie, but you have one final thing.
And thank you so much to Pip, one of our wonderful members who sent me this. Predictive programming, I guess. I'm going to be talking and showing you a little bit of a film called Humane, although perhaps we ought to call it Inhumane. And this is a trigger warning. So if you've got kids with you, although this is just a trailer, you might just want to come back and look at this little clip later. But we're talking climate crisis, we're talking environmental collapse, we're talking about, should we depopulate the population? And is this the new Logan's Run? Have a look at the trailer.
While we every day bear witness to the catastrophic ecological collapse that is plaguing our planet, we must not forget that this is, above all, a human crisis.
I am in favor of this government doing whatever it takes to win this war. It's not a war. Wars have opposing sides. Humanity is the opposing side. We are engaged in nothing less than a life and death struggle against our own extinction.
What is going on?
We've decided to enlist. You're not gonna like this, but we're here to collect 2 bodies.
I already told you Dawn left.
And that's unfortunate. But the rules are the same for everybody. Think about your lives. I'm sure one of you is gonna realize that it's not all that great. You think I'm the bad guy, but I'm doing important work to save the planet.
We can get through this, but we have to stick together.
It's been a hell of a night, huh?
All I can say, Debbie, is wow.
I don't know what to say either, Mike. It was released on April the 26th, and there are trailers on YouTube, but I would put out a trigger warning if you happen to have vulnerable people with you or children.
Yes. Okay. Well, on that happy note, then, we need to end for today. We will be back in a few minutes if you're a UK Column member for some extra. I'm going to say thank you to Debbie and Ben for joining me today, and thank you all for watching. If you're not joining us for extra, please consider joining the UK Column as a member, and then you can join us for extra. But if you're not, have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday at 1 p.m. as usual. See you then. Bye-bye.